Welcome, everybody. It's Cannabis News. I'm your host, Joe Klare. It's August 9th, 2019. The show, as always, is presented by the Marijuana Times. You can find us at marijuanatimes.org. A lot of great articles there from a bunch of great writers covering the cannabis community, industry, and beyond. Also, if you click the video tab at marijuanatimes.org, you will find this show. Just so much great stuff going on at marijuanatimes.org. Now, before we get to sponsoring the stories and all that, today's kind of a weird show for a couple reasons. First, there's no story from the Marijuana Times. If any of our longtime listeners, if you follow the pattern of this show, I'll do 3 stories. The first one's from the Marijuana Times, and the other 2 are from other sources. And that's the way it's been for just about every show. But for the second time now, in 460 episodes, it's a rare occurrence, we don't have a story from the Marijuana Times. The reason for this is because while I check in, obviously, to see what other writers are doing when it comes to stories that I'm writing, I really don't check in to see what other writers on our site are doing when it comes to other stories that I cover from other sources during the Cannabis News episodes. I've never really had to. Like I said, this is only the second time in 460 episodes that this has happened. Basically, all the stories that are on the Marijuana Times right now, all the recent stories, are stories that I've covered. Like West Virginia is one. Let me see what the other ones are real quick. Just to let a little behind the scenes here for the show. John Morgan joining the fight to legalize marijuana in Florida in 2020. That's on there. Arizona Iced Tea entering the cannabis industry. That's a story that's up there. These are all stories that I've covered this week and subsequently were written, or before I covered them, or whenever. I don't know the timing of when they were written. But they're stories I've already covered on the show, so I'm not going to cover them again from the Marijuana Times. As I said, I really don't check in to see what other writers are working on when it comes to those stories, because there's so many marijuana stories, and this happens so rarely that I don't make that effort. Maybe I should. I don't know if it's really a big deal, because like today I just do 3 stories from other sources instead of the Marijuana Times. It's really not that big of a thing, which I guess is why I don't put in the effort when it comes to stories I do here. Now, of course, stories I write, I can't duplicate what other writers are writing for obvious reasons, but here, as I said, there's just so many marijuana stories that it's just only the second time in 460 episodes that it's come up. So that's why there's no story from the Marijuana Times today. The other weird occurrence, as far as memory serves me, has never happened before. We have 2 stories from the same source, that being Newsweek. Today we have 2 of the 3 stories are from Newsweek. The reason for that is that the second Newsweek story is time sensitive. It's about an outdoor festival that's happening in California this weekend. And there's some really good news associated with that. And if I was to wait to do that story next week after the festival, it would be dumb. I would be saying, hey, there's this really great thing that's going to happen at this music festival in California, but you missed it because it happened last weekend. So, joke's on you. So I'm doing that story today. Hence, 2 stories from Newsweek, none from the Marijuana Times. That's it. You'll deal with it. It's fine. It's still 3 marijuana news stories. And that is the basic format of the show. Today, talking about Bernie Sanders and what he would do when it comes to marijuana if he becomes president. Also a new study that shows that about adolescent cannabis exposure and how that affects people later in life. And the second Newsweek story is about the Outside Lands Festival happening in the San Francisco area this weekend. So we'll get to all of that. But first, of course, Cannabis News is brought to you by Natureside, Natureside.com, an awesome sponsor of the show. Check out their organic, all-natural pesticides. Grow safe and poison-free. Don't use banned pesticides in the state that you're growing in. Be regulatory compliant. You can do these things. You can do them all with Natureside. Accomplish so much with Natureside, nature-side.com. This first story from Newsweek, the first of 2 stories from Newsweek, as I said. Bernie Sanders said he would legalize marijuana by executive order. Of course, many of you may know that Bernie Sanders was recently on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. He said, quote, "When I ran for president for the Democratic nomination in 2016, I talked about a broken criminal justice system, which ends up having the United States more people in jail than any other country. And what I call for then and I call for now is the legalization of marijuana in America." A good thing, obviously. Sanders outlined his plans in response to Rogan pointing out that pesticides and other poor agricultural practices can endanger cannabis consumers in states where it's currently legal, unless, of course, you use Natureside. Extra sponsor mention. Bam! Killing it today. Even with the snafus, I'm still rolling along. As I said yesterday, this is a well-oiled machine. All of it's because it's not federally legal, Rogan added, because we can't have sanctioned licensed companies doing an ethical job of growing something that any responsible, law-abiding person should be able to consume. Sanders pointed out that marijuana is on Schedule 1 along with category, along with drugs like heroin, MDMA, and psilocybin. I don't know. Mushrooms. That is insane. Heroin is a killer drug, he said in the episode. You can argue the pluses and minuses of marijuana, but marijuana ain't heroin. So we have to end that. And that's what I will do as President of the United States. I believe we can do that through executive order, and I will do that. Whether or not it can be done through executive order, I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But Sanders, I will give him credit, even though him and I disagree on most political issues outside the realm of marijuana and criminal justice. He has been a vocal supporter for marijuana legalization, even before many of his Democratic counterparts running for the nomination for president, even before they came out. You know, he was for marijuana legalization back when Kamala Harris was still throwing people in jail in California for marijuana. So he does have that going for him. As I said, whether or not it can be done through executive order, there's differing schools of thought on that. Hopefully it'll get done before we even have to worry about a new president. But if not, then, well, maybe a new president will get it done. However they get it done, I don't care. I just don't. I don't care if he does it with a magic wand, a magic Harry Potter wand. I don't care. Just do it already. People who use, possess, consume, sell, give away, grow marijuana. None of these people are infringing on the rights of anyone else. Therefore, they are not criminals. The second story is from the Normal blog. New study says adolescent cannabis exposure not associated with structural brain differences in adulthood. The use of cannabis during adolescence is not associated with structural brain differences in adulthood. This is according to longitudinal data published in the journal Drug and Alcohol Dependence. Investigators from Arizona State University and the University of Pittsburgh assessed the impact of adolescent cannabis exposure on brain morphology in adulthood. That's right, we're breaking out the big words. Today, researchers tracked differing adolescent use patterns from no cannabis use to heavy use in a cohort of 1,000 teenage boys. Authors reported, quote, "We found that adolescent cannabis use was not associated with adult brain structure in a sample of boys followed prospectively to adulthood." They added the boys were classified into one of four prototypical adolescent cannabis trajectory subgroups based on prospective assessments of cannabis use frequency from age 13 to 19. God, that's all unnecessary. Just speak English. Good Lord, we know you're smart. We know you're scientists. It's like they're screaming, "We're scientists. Look at all these big words." We found no difference in adult brain structure for boys in the different adolescent cannabis trajectory subgroups. Even boys with the highest level of cannabis exposure in adolescence showed subcortical brain volumes and cortical brain volumes and thickness in adulthood that were similar to boys with almost no exposure to cannabis throughout adolescence. In other words, them using cannabis when they were young had no effect on their brain as adults. See how easy that is? I broke all that down in like 12 words. It's not that difficult. God, imagine if I did that with this show. It would take an hour. Each episode would be an hour of me just using big words. We get it. You're scientists. You're smart. We understand. It's fine. It's all right. It's all right if every word doesn't have 16 letters in it. You'll get your point across. Even the smart people will be able to understand your dumbed down language. That's the beauty of dumbed down language. Everybody gets it. The smart people, the dumb people, everybody in between. We all know what you're talking about. Anyway, this next story, as I mentioned, is a second story from Newsweek, the time-sensitive story. If you're in California, well, you want to start toward this festival. Outside Lands 2019 allows public marijuana consumption. Concert goers can bring their own bong. That's right. No, this is not a Onion story. And it's also by Andrew Whalen, who the Bernie Sanders story was also by. Two stories from the same source, from the same author, on the same day. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's really, if you could collect podcasts, this would be a collector's item. But you cannot, so don't. The 2019 Outside Lands Festival, music festival in San Francisco, will allow for the public sale and consumption of cannabis, one of the first times it will be legal to smoke marijuana in public in the United States. On Wednesday, festival planners won permit approval for marijuana sales from the San Francisco Office of Cannabis, which will be conducted in a designated smoking area called Grasslands. That's right, Grasslands. It's going to be a landmark moment for the end of Prohibition, said Alex Fang, co-founder of Oakland cannabis company Sublime. Public consumption of cannabis is generally illegal in California, but outside lands will work in compliance with new rules developed by the Office of Cannabis, setting apart marijuana sales from the rest of the festival behind an opaque barrier. Approximately a dozen cannabis companies will be on site, with consumption limited to 3 areas separate from the vendors. Attendees will be able to be allowed to bring their own smoking paraphernalia, but nothing with glass or sharp objects, or sharp edges rather, is allowed at the festival. So the bongs will have to be acrylic or silicone if that's your jam, I guess. I know. The hipness just oozes from me. I can't help it. I can't turn it off. Sponsors for Grasslands include Cannabis Seller Flow Canna. Also, the vendors include Sublime, Bloom Farms, Kiva Confections, Cresco Labs, all of which are expected to offer a wide variety of cannabis products, including flower, edibles, cartridges, and pre-rolled joints. Outside land festival goers will be able to purchase up to 2 grams of concentrates or 7 grams of marijuana flower. Anyone who wants to purchase marijuana at outside lands must be 21 years of age and have an ID. Outside cannabis is not permitted unless it's medical marijuana and the user has documentation. So if you're just a recreational user in California and you're going into Grasslands, you can't bring your own stuff. You got to buy it there. Artists performing at outside lands include Paul Simon, Childish Gambino, The Lumineers, 21 Pilots, Flume, Blink-182, Lil Wayne, Casey Musgraves, Counting Crows, and more. So if you're going to outside lands, bring your bong, your acrylic bong, your silicone bong, whatever. I guess a metal pipe would also be okay. It's not glass or sharp edges. I wouldn't recommend a metal pipe, but I mean, for the special occasion, hey, do what you got to do. Or just bring some rolling papers. I mean, whatever. Listen to me, I'm trying to tell you how to consume marijuana. I'm pretty sure you're familiar. I think you know. I'm telling the viewers of Cannabis News all the different ways they can consume marijuana. I think the knowledge is well spread. You guys know what you're doing when it comes to consuming marijuana. So go do that. Sans glass or sharp edges at Grasslands, the outside lands, in a 2019 festival near San Francisco. That's pretty cool. Hopefully something that will be the norm someday, as opposed to, hey, this is a huge story. I got to do 2 stories from Newsweek just to fit this story in, type of era we live in now. So thanks, everybody, for getting through this weird episode with me. It is the weekend, so go enjoy your weekend. Check us out, the Marijuana Times, marijuanatimes.org. Thank you to Natureside, nature-side.com, and their organic, all-natural pesticides. Thank you all for watching and listening and spreading the truth about cannabis with this show. And we'll see you next week right here on Cannabis News.